The crystal flute felt cold in Ethan Cole's hand, a stark contrast to the warmth that had filled his chest just moments before. 10 years. A decade with Isabella. The ambient chatter of Aria, a restaurant so exclusive it felt less like a public space and more like a private club, was a gentle symphony of success. The low murmur of conversations, the soft clinking of silver against porcelain, the scent of truffle oil and old Bordeaux, it was the soundtrack of their life, a life built on twin pillars of ambition and excellence. Ethan, assistant U.S. attorney, the man they called the Confessor, for his almost supernatural ability to dismantle the most fortified lies, looked at his wife and saw the culmination of every right decision he'd ever made. Isabella Izzy Vance was captivating. It wasn't just her beauty, though that was undeniable, the sharp, intelligent line of her jaw, the eyes that could hold 1,000 secrets or project utter sincerity with equal ease. It was the energy that radiated from her, a brilliant, crackling aura of competence. As the most sought-after political strategist in the country, she didn't just run campaigns, she forged destinies. To us, Ethan had toasted, his smile genuine, the kind he rarely used in a courtroom. To 10 years down and a lifetime to go. Izzy had smiled back, raising her glass. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. They were cool, distant, like chips of ice. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't the warm alto he loved. It was a blade, honed and precise, slicing through the comfortable atmosphere he had so carefully constructed. To 10 years, she'd replied, her gaze unwavering. Of you looking at the world in black and white, while I've had to live in the million shades of gray, you refuse to see. The words hung in the air between them, more shocking than a scream. Several heads turned their way, wine glasses paused midway to lips. A waiter, approaching with a fresh bottle of champagne, froze mid-stride, a deer caught in the headlights of a marital collision. Ethan's smile didn't falter, but it changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by the cool, analytical focus that had made hardened criminals confess. He saw her expression, and beneath the anger, there was a chilling calculation. This wasn't just an outburst, it was a decision. That's quite a toast, Izzy. Don't patronize me, Ethan, she whispered, her voice a low hiss. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass so intensely he thought it might shatter. A flush of anger crept up her neck, a crimson tide against the diamond necklace he'd given her that morning, a gift she had accepted with a kiss that now felt like the ultimate deception. In that moment, the prosecutor in him awoke from a decade-long slumber. He saw not his wife, but an adversary. He saw a motive. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since his star witness in the Senator Marcus Thorne corruption case, a mild-mannered accountant named David Chen, had vanished without a trace. Thorne was Izzy's latest client, her magnum opus transforming a notoriously corrupt politician into a champion of the people. Chen's testimony was the linchpin, the one piece of evidence that could send Thorne to prison and dismantle Izzy's carefully crafted narrative. Ethan had thought the timing was a coincidence, a stroke of bad luck. But now, watching the cold fury in his wife's eyes, everything crystallized. The missing witness, the Thorne case. The woman who could sell ice to an Eskimo and make him thank her for the privilege. He had always known they approached the world differently, that her truth was malleable. He just never imagined she'd use her skills against him. He calmly folded his napkin, placing it on the table. The gesture was deliberate, a signal that the dinner, and perhaps the marriage, was over. Let's not make a scene, he said, his voice low and controlled, though a storm raged within him. He signaled for the check, the casual motion belying the tectonic shift that had just occurred in his world. Her eyes, cold and defiant, met his. There was no remorse there, only victory. He realized with a chilling certainty that in her mind, she had already won. The charade was over, and as he looked at the woman he had loved for a decade, he knew he was looking at the architect of his greatest professional failure and his deepest personal wound. He was no longer just her husband. He was the investigator on a case that had just become terrifyingly personal. The silence in the car on the way home was a physical entity. It was thick and suffocating, a tangible barrier erected between two people who had once shared every secret. Ethan drove mechanically, his mind a whirlwind of case files, timelines, and possibilities. The husband in him was a casualty, bleeding out on the plush leather seats of their shared Mercedes. The prosecutor was in full command, already building a case, brick by painful brick. Their house, a beautiful colonial they had spent years restoring, loomed into view. It was a monument to a shared dream that now felt like a lie. The porch where they used to drink wine on summer evenings, discussing their days, their cases, their strategies. It all seemed like a stage set for a play whose final act had just been revealed as a tragedy. He pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the tension. He turned to her, his face illuminated by the cold glow of the dashboard lights. "How did you find out about his daughter's health condition?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. It wasn't a husband asking a wife. It was an attorney deposing a witness. Izzy stared straight ahead, her profile a perfect, unyielding silhouette. "Your briefcase isn't as secure as you think, Ethan. You bring your work home. You shouldn't." Such a simple answer. Such a catastrophic breach. All those nights he'd left his case files on the study desk. She hadn't just been his wife. She had been the opposition, gathering intelligence. The sanctity of their home had been compromised, turned into a listening post. "You used it against him," Ethan stated. "It wasn't a question. You blackmailed my witness." "I protected my client," she snapped back, finally turning to face him, her eyes blazing. "This is how the world works, Ethan. Not everyone has the luxury of your moral high ground." He got out of the car and walked around to open her door, a gesture of ingrained chivalry that felt absurd in its context. "Politics doesn't exempt you from the law, Izzy. You, of all people, should know that." She stepped out, her expensive dress shimmering under the porch light. "Is that a threat? Are you going to prosecute your own wife?" He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and wondered how 10 years of shared history could evaporate in a single evening. "No," he said, the word heavy with a truth he was just beginning to accept. "It's a promise." The next morning, Ethan was in his office at 6 a.m. His trusted colleague, Michael, found him staring at a blank whiteboard, a cold cup of coffee in his hand. "Rough night?" Michael asked, his concern genuine. "You could say that," Ethan admitted, his voice hoarse. "Michael, I need you to do something for me. Completely off the books. Pull everything you can on the finances of Isabella Vance's consulting firm. Every transaction, every shell company, every subcontractor linked to the Marcus Thorne campaign." Michael's eyebrows shot up. "Ethan, that's a firewall you can't cross. If you have a personal conflict, you have to recuse yourself. You're talking about investigating your own wife." And Ethan met his friend's gaze, his own eyes hard as flint. "I'm building a shadow file. My key witness was compromised by someone with inside information. Information they could only have gotten from me, from my home. The system can't handle this. She's too good. I have to build the case myself before I hand it over. It's the only way." The massive ethical breach hung in the air between them, heavy and poisonous. Michael, ever loyal, simply nodded. "I'll get it done." Ham. For days, Ethan operated in a state of suspended grief. He moved through the motions of his life, a ghost, in his own home. He and Izzy circled each other like wary boxers, their conversations a minefield of pleasantries and unspoken accusations. During the day, he was a machine, meticulously sifting through the financial labyrinth Izzy had constructed. He wasn't looking for evidence against Thorne anymore. He was looking for his wife's fingerprints. And he found them everywhere. The name on the incorporation documents was Eastview Analytics. It had no website, no physical address beyond a P.O. box, and had been created just 3 months prior. Its sole purpose, as far as Ethan could tell, was to receive a single payment of $1.7 million from Senator Thorne's campaign, funneled through Izzy's primary consulting firm. It was a classic money laundering scheme, elegant in its simplicity. The owner was listed as Patricia Winters, Izzy's mother's maiden name. The signature, though deliberately altered, was unmistakably hers. From Eastview, the money had splintered, paid out in dozens of smaller transactions. One payment stood out, $150,000 to a small boutique law firm specializing in complex experimental medical treatments. A few discreet inquiries later, Ethan had his confirmation. The firm had recently taken on a pro bono case for the daughter of one David Chen. The picture was now damningly clear. Izzy had used campaign funds to create a shadow company, then used that company's laundered money to provide the life-saving medical care David Chen's daughter desperately needed. Care that came with strings attached, his silence. But a picture wasn't enough. Ethan needed to flip her network. His first target was Jordan Blake, Thorne's ambitious, perpetually nervous campaign manager. Ethan summoned him to his office, a room designed to intimidate, with its dark wood in view of the federal courthouse. "Mr. Blake," Ethan began smoothly, sliding a glass of water across the table that Blake didn't touch. "Let's talk about campaign finance, specifically, payments made to Eastview Analytics." Blake's composure was a fragile veneer. "That's a subcontractor relationship. Izzy handles those. She's the best in the business." Ethan leaned forward, his voice hardening. "Let me be clear. We have financial records showing campaign funds being misappropriated to coerce a federal witness. That's a 15-year prison sentence." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. He then slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Or you could have this, a full immunity agreement in exchange for your cooperation." Blake stared at the paper as if it were a snake. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "You're investigating your own wife, Audie." "I'm investigating a felony, Mr. Blake," Ethan corrected him. "Her involvement is unfortunate, but it doesn't change my duty." He saw the calculation in Blake's eyes: loyalty versus self-preservation. It was the same calculation Izzy taught all her people to make. Pragmatism above all. After a long, agonizing silence, Blake reached for the pen with a trembling hand. "Where do I sign?" One by one, Ethan flipped them. The accountant who set up the shell company, the private investigator who tracked David Chen. Each one, when faced with the stark reality of prison, chose to betray the woman who had taught them that loyalty was just another commodity. Each signed an immunity agreement. Each gave Ethan another piece of the puzzle. He kept the investigation compartmentalized. At home, the charade continued. "Thorne is up 5 points in the polls," Izzy mentioned one evening, her voice carefully neutral as they shared a rare silent dinner. "You've done an amazing job with his campaign," Ethan replied, pushing food around his plate. Her eyes narrowed, sensing the insincerity but unable to pinpoint its source. "It's been challenging," she said, a note of weariness in her voice he hadn't heard before. "Remarkable how the whole David Chen distraction just went away." Ethan met her gaze across the table. "Politics is full of lucky breaks," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. She clinked her glass against his, a confident, knowing smile playing on her lips. She believed she had won. She believed he had accepted defeat. She didn't understand that he wasn't retreating. He was reloading. The call came 2 days before the final senatorial debate. A detective from Arizona. "We found him, Mr. Cole. David Chen. He's working as a janitor in Tucson. He's terrified. Says a woman threatened his daughter's medical care if he testified." Did he say who?" Ethan asked, his heart pounding. "Not by name, but he said she knew details about his case that weren't public, and she showed him photocopies of his daughter's medical records. Documents he says were in your possession." The final piece clicked into place. "Bring him in," Ethan ordered. "Full protection. I want him on a plane tonight." That evening, he came home to find Izzy waiting for him in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand and murder in her eyes. "Jordan Blake canceled our strategy meeting today," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "His assistant said he was cooperating with authorities. Strange choice of words, don't you think?" Ethan set down his briefcase. "Perhaps he's having legal troubles." "Don't insult my intelligence, Ethan," she seethed, placing her glass down with exaggerated care. "You're building a case against me." She stood, moving closer, her presence filling the room. "You couldn't beat Thorne legitimately, so you're trying to destroy his campaign through me. It's pathetic." "Is that what you think this is about?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Winning a case? What else would it be about? Your precious reputation? Your unbroken record? How about the law, Izzy? The justice system you've spent your career helping your clients circumvent?" She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "The justice system is a game, Ethan. I just play it better than you." "Oh, do." "It's not a game to me," he said. "It never has been." "That's your problem," she replied, her face hardening. "It always has been." The morning of the arrest was cold and gray, a mirror of the feeling in Ethan's soul. He dressed with particular care. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, power tie. His war uniform. He slipped the arrest warrant for Isabella Vance into his inside pocket, the paper feeling as heavy as a tombstone against his chest. At precisely 7 a.m., his teams moved. The raid on Thorne's campaign headquarters was swift and silent. They entered a scene of bustling activity. Staffers froze. Phones were dropped. Senator Marcus Thorne himself turned pale as a detective strode forward, handcuffs glinting. "Senator Thorne," You are under arrest." But Ethan's eyes scanned the room, a cold dread settling in his stomach. She wasn't there. "Where's Isabella Vance?" he demanded of the nearest staffer. The young woman stared at him, wide-eyed. She called in sick this morning, said she was at the Regency Hotel and would join remotely. She was running. He and Michael raced to the hotel, sirens wailing in the distance, a sound that now felt like a lament. The manager confirmed she had checked out at 5:45 a.m. The security footage was grainy but clear. Izzy, in a baseball cap and sunglasses, wheeling a large suitcase out a side door. She had more than an hour's head start. As chaos erupted across the city, as news channels began broadcasting images of a handcuffed Senator Thorne, Ethan stood in the sterile hotel security office, watching his wife disappear from his life. His phone rang, an unknown number. He answered, his hand trembling slightly. "Cole." Her voice came through, clear and composed. "You should see your face on television, Ethan. The cuckolded husband, the betrayed prosecutor. It's quite the narrative they're spinning." Where are you, Izzy?" he asked, signaling for a trace. "Somewhere you'll never find me," she replied. There was a soft laugh, a sound that was both intimate and mocking. "You know, for a man they call the confessor, you were always remarkably easy to lie to. Goodbye, Ethan." The line went dead. The trace failed. She was gone. The months that followed were a blur of successful prosecutions and private obsession. The case against Senator Thorne was airtight. With David Chen's testimony and the mountain of financial evidence, convictions were secured across the board. Justice, in its black and white form, had been served. But for Ethan, the victory was hollow. The main architect of the crime remained at large, a ghost he chased across continents. He kept a map in his desk drawer, marked with pins at every rumored sighting. A hotel maid in Vancouver who thought she recognized her. A facial recognition hit in a Mexico City market. Each time, he would drop everything, only to arrive too late. She was always one step ahead. "You have to let it go," Michael told him one evening. "She's gone, Ethan. Maybe for good." "She'll make a mistake eventually," Ethan insisted, though his own conviction was waning. "Everyone does." 8 months after her disappearance, a package arrived at his office. No return address, postmarked from Argentina. Inside was a single flash drive and a note in her elegant, familiar handwriting, "For when you are ready to know the whole truth." After hours, with his office door locked, he plugged it in. Her face appeared on his screen. She looked different, hair shorter, darker, her face thinner, but the eyes were the same, holding the same unreadable intelligence. "Hello, Ethan," she began. "If you're watching this, it means you're still looking for me. I expected nothing less." What followed was a story so audacious, so far-reaching, it made the Marcus Thorne case seem like petty theft. She described a shadow network of political operatives, corporate interests, and even foreign agents who had been manipulating local elections for years, using them as a testing ground for larger-scale interference. "Thorne was just a pawn," she explained, her voice even. "I was using him to get close to the people really pulling the strings. I had to protect him to maintain my cover. When your investigation threatened to expose him prematurely, I was forced to choose between your case and a much larger mission. Silencing your witness was a regrettable, but necessary, move." She held up another thumb drive to the camera. "Everything I've collected is on here. Names, dates, offshore accounts, recordings. Enough to bring down people far more dangerous than Marcus Thorne. I couldn't tell you, Ethan. You're too much of a Boy Scout. You would have insisted on doing things by the book, and these people don't play by any book you've ever read." The video ended with something he never expected. Her composure finally cracked. A flicker of the woman he had married breaking through the hardened strategist. "I'm sorry for how I hurt you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't deserve that. Maybe someday you'll understand. Goodbye, Ethan." The screen went black. Ethan sat in his darkened office, the silence ringing in his ears. Was it true? Or was this just her grandest narrative yet, a masterpiece of misdirection designed to absolve her of her crimes? 3 days later, a second package arrived. It contained the thumb drive she had shown him. He spent a week secretly verifying the data. To his astonishment, it all checked out. The rabbit hole went deeper than he could have ever imagined, implicating some of the most powerful people in the country. Izzy hadn't been obstructing his small case. She had been protecting her much, much larger one. Ethan took the evidence to the FBI. He explained its source in vague terms, a confidential informant he couldn't name. A secret, high-level investigation was launched, one that would eventually shake the foundations of the political establishment. Izzy remained a ghost, but her work was setting in motion the very justice she had claimed to be pursuing. Then, 18 months after she had vanished, his office phone rang close to midnight. "Winslow Park," her voice said, tense and hurried. "East entrance. 30 minutes. Come alone. This is your only chance." He went. He didn't call for backup. This was beyond procedure now. He left his gun in the car. She emerged from the shadows of a large oak tree, looking harder, thinner. But it was her. "You came alone," she observed. "Why now, Izzy? Why risk this?" "It's almost over," she said cryptically. She held out a small USB drive. "The final piece. Everything they need to connect the dots. I couldn't send this one. They're monitoring everything. It had to be you, in person. I need your word you'll handle it personally. Give it only to people you trust, absolutely." "My word as the man you betrayed?" The bitterness slipped out, raw and real. "Expression sofne. Your word as the only truly honest man I've ever known." The words hit him harder than any accusation could have. He stepped forward and took the drive. "What happens now?" "I disappear again," she said simply. "For good this time." "You could come in," he offered, a familiar, futile plea. "Witness protection, a fresh start." She smiled sadly. "There are no fresh starts for people like me, Ethan. Only new covers, new lies." She paused, looking away toward the distant city lights. "Some things are black and white, even in my gray world. You were right about that." He had to ask. The question that had haunted him for 18 months. Was any of it real? Us? She met his gaze, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the woman he had fallen in love with at a political gala so many years ago. "That was the only real thing in my life, Ethan," she whispered. "The only thing I regret losing." Before he could respond, headlights swept across the park entrance. A car door opened. A man in a dark suit emerged. Ethan's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. "They're here. Run now." She was already melting back into the shadows as a second man got out of the car. They moved with professional, predatory grace. These were not police. These were the shadows she had been running from. A voice shouted. A muffled pop, the sound of a silenced handgun, splintered the bark of a tree inches from his head. He ran. He ran through the rain-slicked park, the USB drive clutched in his fist, the final words of his wife echoing in his mind. The evidence on that drive proved to be the linchpin. It led to the indictment of senators, judges, and lobbyists. The men who chased him that night were found in a burned-out car a week later. The price of justice, Ethan discovered, was eternal vigilance. As for Izzy, she kept her word. The postcard stopped. The sightings ceased. She vanished completely. 6 months after that night in the park, he received one final package. Inside was a divorce decree, already signed by her, with a short, handwritten note. "You deserve to move on." He signed the papers. Not because he wanted to move on, but because it was the only honest thing left to do, the only black and white choice in their impossibly gray story. They still called him the confessor at the courthouse, the man who never lost, who always got the truth. But they would never know that the greatest confession he ever received came from the woman who knew him best, and that the truth he found was nothing like the one he thought he was seeking. He had won the case, but he had lost the world.